Okay, wow. You guys really outdid yourselves this time. You
Mhm.
sent us so much stuff about influencer culture. We've got articles and social media posts and even, get this, a clip from Dr. Phil.
It seems like everyone's got an opinion on influencer culture.
Right. And after going through all the stuff you sent, it looks like there's a lot more to it than meets the eye.
Yeah, definitely. It's complicated.
Totally. So today we're going deep. We're going to go past all those perfect little squares and see what's really going on. Like, how did this whole thing even, how did it even become a thing? What does it actually take to be an influencer these days? And what about us, the viewers? How's it impacting us?
Well, in a lot of ways, influencer culture is kind of like a mirror.
Oh, I like that.
It reflects some big shifts happening in our society, especially when it comes to things like, media and marketing and how we all consume information.
A mirror reflecting bigger shifts. Okay, I'm going to write that down. But, okay, so
Yeah.
rewind with me for a sec. The stuff we're looking at actually traces this whole influencer thing all the way back to like the early days of blogging. I
Wow.
mean, talk about ancient history, right?
Yeah, it really does feel like a different era.
Totally.
And it's fascinating how the term influencer itself has it's changed so much over time. In the beginning it was really about it was bloggers mostly. They were just sharing their passions, building online communities like, Live White.
Oh, yeah, right, right.
One of the content creators we're going to be hearing from today. She started out, as a young mom, just wanting to connect with other women
Please
who
do.
were, going through similar experiences.
Totally.
But then as social media kind of blew up, the word influencer, it started to feel, I don't know, kind of loaded,
Yeah.
became associated with all those like picture perfect images and brand deals and this pressure to constantly be on.
Right. It's like influencer sounds kind of icky now,
Mhm.
which is probably why someone like Liv White prefers content creator.
Right.
It just feels, I don't know, more genuine, like more about sharing a real perspective than just trying to sell you something.
I think that shift in wording really points to a tension that's at the heart of the influencer world.
Right.
It's this constant struggle to balance authenticity with the demands of this industry.
Yeah.
That's worth, billions and billions of dollars.
Hold up, hold up. Multi-billion dollar. You sure that's not a typo?
Oh, no, no, not a typo at all. By 2023, influencer marketing was projected to be worth a staggering $21 billion.
Whoa.
Just to put that in perspective, in just 8 years, its value increased more than tenfold.
Okay, so $21 billion. I mean, it's like winning the lottery like a bunch of times over. Not even sure how many times.
Yeah. It's a lot of money, and it really speaks to just how effective influencer marketing can be. Brands are, they're recognizing that these creators, they have a direct connection to their target audience,
Mhm.
a level of trust that traditional advertising just can't match.
So basically, if you're starting a business today, ignoring influencer marketing would be like, I don't know, like trying to run a marathon with your shoelaces tied together. Like you're just not going to get very far.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
Thanks. I thought so.
And what's interesting to me is the gender dynamic here. Influencer culture is overwhelmingly female.
Okay, so here's where things get juicy, right?
Yeah.
You're telling me it's a girls' club.
Pretty much. Roughly 70% of influencers are women.
Wow.
And on Instagram, that figure jumps to 80% for, those who are actually making money from their content.
Okay, so that really makes you wonder. I mean, is this like a new kind of entrepreneurship for women?
It's a good question.
Like creating these opportunities where traditional media, maybe hasn't always been so supportive.
Yeah. I mean, think about it. Historically, women's work, especially in fields like, marketing and promotion, has been consistently undervalued.
For sure.
So could influencer culture be a way for women to reclaim that power,
Right.
and that expertise?
It's like they saw this gap in the market and they were like, move over, boys.
Yeah.
We got this.
Right. And one of their keys to success is, it's building that strong, almost personal connection with their followers.
Right.
But how do they pull that off?
Yeah. How do they do that?
I think that's where the psychology gets really interesting.
Ooh, psychology. Okay, now you're speaking my language. Give me all the details.
Well, the sources talk about this concept called pseudo-intimacy,
Okay.
which is basically, it's about creating this feeling of closeness, even though the whole relationship is essentially one-sided.
So it's like, when you feel like you could just hang out and chat with your favorite YouTuber,
Mm.
even though, like, in real life, you've never even met them.
Exactly. They let you into their lives, they share personal stories, they respond to comments. It really feels like you know them,
Right.
even though you're just watching through a screen.
Totally.
And the sources actually give some great examples.
Okay.
So Natalie, the fashion influencer,
Yeah, yeah.
she makes a point of using strong eye contact in her videos, and she shares personal photos, and she replies to comments super fast.
So she's going for that, like, accessible friend vibe,
Exactly.
not like some distant, unrelatable celebrity.
Right, exactly. And it's this what they call contrived authenticity
Okay.
that makes it so effective.
Yeah.
Even if logically that it's, a carefully constructed persona,
Sure.
it's hard to resist feeling like you're part of something special, like you're in on the secret.
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes you wonder, though, is any of it really real?
Mhm.
Or are both sides, the influencer and the follower, kind of playing a role in this big online performance? I mean,
Yeah.
I follow this baking influencer who, like, makes me feel like I'm right there in her kitchen with her,
Yeah.
even though I'm really just, like, on my couch in my sweatpants.
Right. It's a fascinating paradox.
It
It
is.
feels real,
Yeah. Mm.
even though we know on some level it's probably staged. And that feeling, that sense of connection is exactly what makes influencer marketing so powerful.
Okay, so I'm starting to see how this all works, right?
Mm-hmm.
You got the pseudo-intimacy, you got the feeling of connection.
Mm-hmm.
But what makes people actually buy the stuff that influencers recommend?
Right.
Is it just because they like them?
Well, that's where the psychology of persuasion comes in.
Uh-huh.
And it goes way beyond just being likable.
Okay.
There are some serious mind games going on
Yeah,
here.
okay. Mind games. Lay it on me.
So first, there's what we call expert power.
Okay.
If an influencer is seen as knowledgeable in a particular area, their recommendations carry a lot of weight.
Mm-hmm.
Like Natalie, with her deep knowledge of, fashion.
So if she tells me that those neon green platform sneakers are like the hottest trend,
Yeah.
I'm more likely to believe her than, like, my grandma, who still thinks that shoulder pads are coming back.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's repeated exposure.
Okay.
The more we see an influencer, the more their opinions and preferences, they start to feel familiar
Mm-hmm.
and believable.
So it's like that song that you hated at first, but then you hear it, like, on
Right.
repeat, and then suddenly you can't get it out of your head.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And in a world where we are just like drowning in information and choices,
Mhm.
influencers become like these filters.
Mm-hmm.
We rely on them to pick out the best products, the best experiences. They save us time, mental energy.
So it's like having a personal shopper,
Yeah.
but for, like, life.
Yeah. And then there's this thing called the sheeple effect.
Ah.
We're social creatures.
Yeah.
We're hardwired to follow the crowd.
Mhm.
So if an influencer has a massive following,
Yeah.
it feels like proof that they must be, credible.
Right, right. So it's like if, like, 100,000 people swear by that new organic face serum, it must be amazing,
Right.
even if it smells weird and costs like a month's rent.
Right. Our brains are wired to see popularity as this form of social proof.
Wow.
And then, of course, there's the attractiveness bias, where we're simply more likely to trust and be persuaded by people that we find physically attractive.
Right. That's like primal instinct stuff.
Exactly. Marketers have been using this forever.
Or yeah, like if a supermodel tells me to drink that weird green juice, I'm probably going to chug it down,
Yeah.
even if it tastes like grass clippings.
Exactly. And finally, there's this thing called the halo effect.
Yeah. The halo effect.
Yeah. So positive feelings about an influencer in one area, like, their style or their humor,
Yeah, yeah.
they can kind of spill over into other areas, even if they're completely unrelated.
Oh. So, okay, if I love an influencer's, like, travel vlogs,
Mm-hmm.
I might be more likely to trust their recommendations for, like, I don't know, mattresses
Right.
or life insurance,
Exactly.
even though those things have nothing to do with travel.
Exactly. Our brains love making these connections.
Right.
Even if they're totally illogical.
Wow. It's kind of scary how easily our brains can be tricked.
It is.
So, okay, so while influencer culture definitely has its, like, upsides, it seems like there's this whole darker side to it, too.
Oh, absolutely. The constant pressure to to perform, the intense scrutiny,
Right.
the blurring of those personal and professional boundaries. It all takes a toll.
Yeah. Like Megan's story on Dr. Phil, she talked about how hard it was to like maintain this perfect online persona
Yeah.
and deal with all the criticism. And it really took a toll on her mental health.
Yeah, her story really highlights the dark side of this always on mentality. Influencers are expected to be constantly creating, sharing, even when they're struggling.
Right. And that kind of pressure,
Yeah,
I mean, that can lead to burnout, anxiety, even depression. I mean,
definitely.
it's like what happened to Megan. She ended up, battling an eating disorder and feeling, incredibly isolated.
Right.
And it's not just the influencers who are at risk, right? The stuff we're looking at also explores the potential downsides for followers,
Mm-hmm.
particularly like young people.
Especially young people.
Yeah, that constant comparison game can be brutal.
Totally.
Scrolling through all those like picture perfect feeds, it can make you feel like you're not good enough. It can lead to like FOMO and body image issues and a whole lot of self-doubt.
Yeah. And the addictive nature of social media itself is a concern, that constant need for validation through, likes and comments. And
Right.
it creates this vicious cycle that can be hard to break.
It's like we're all chasing that little dopamine hit, that fleeting feeling of approval.
Exactly. And that brings us to another really interesting aspect of influencer culture,
Okay.
parasocial relationships.
Ooh, that one sounds complicated. Break it down for me. Parasocial relationships. What are we talking about?
So think of it as this one-sided bond that viewers or fans develop with media figures, that celebrity that you feel like personally, even though you've never met them.
Oh, look, when you're convinced that you could like totally be best friends with Beyonce
Yeah,
or like have like a deep philosophical conversation with Oprah over tea.
exactly.
Yeah.
But in influencer culture, these relationships, they can feel even more intense because of that cultivated intimacy that we talked about earlier.
Right, because they're sharing so much of their lives.
Yeah.
Their struggles, their wins.
Right.
It creates this illusion of friendship,
Mm-hmm.
even though it's all happening through a screen.
Exactly. And that raises some interesting questions about boundaries and consent.
Yeah, because when that line between like fan and friend gets blurry,
Mm-hmm.
things can get messy fast.
Right. And the sources offer a couple of examples of this.
Okay.
Joe Stanley, who had a long career in radio, talked about dealing with listeners who felt, overly invested in her personal life.
Right. I bet that must be so strange.
Yeah.
To have like complete strangers feel like they have this right to your time, your emotional energy.
Right. And Liz White talked about struggling with, the emotional burden of followers sharing, deeply personal issues with her, in her DMs.
Oh, wow. It's like she's just trying to be relatable and authentic, and suddenly she's like an unofficial therapist for thousands of people.
Exactly. And it really highlights the challenge of managing those parasocial relationships,
Mhm.
when they start to, veer into unhealthy territory.
So I guess the question is, where does healthy fandom end and unhealthy obsession begin? And how do we draw those lines, especially in a world where the boundaries are getting blurrier by the day?
Yeah, it's a tricky question with no easy answers. But, just starting to ask those questions is an important step.
It is. Wow. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground already. We've gone from the origins of influencer culture to the psychology behind its success and even some of the potential pitfalls.
Yeah, for both creators and followers.
Exactly. I mean, this has been like a deep dive already, and we're just getting started. There's still so much juicy stuff to unpack. But hey, before we get too carried away, let's take a quick pause here, catch our breath. We'll be right back to explore even more fascinating aspects of influencer culture. Stay tuned. All right, so we're back, and we just scratched the surface of influencer culture in that first part of our deep dive.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about like how it evolved, the psychology behind it, and even some of the potential downsides.
Yeah, we uncovered some pretty surprising stuff.
For sure, but there's this one big question that we haven't really tackled
You're
yet.
talking about ethics, right?
Yeah.
That's a whole other can of worms.
Totally. So if influencers are so good at persuasion, like, is anyone immune? And what kind of responsibility do they have for the stuff they promote?
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to like younger audiences, you know?
Yeah, I think it all boils down to transparency and authenticity.
Yeah.
How much do influencers actually owe their followers when it comes to like disclosing brand deals and sponsorships?
Right, right. Because sometimes it's like super obvious.
Yeah.
Like when they're unboxing a mountain of like free goodies, you know?
Hmm.
But other times it's a lot more subtle. Like,
Hmm.
is that influencer really obsessed with that new teeth whitening kit? Or are they just getting paid to say they are?
Yeah, it can be really hard to tell.
Bye
And
bye.
and that's where the conflict lies, I think. The sources we're looking at, they highlight this real tension between an influencer's desire to seem authentic and the financial realities of the industry.
Right. It's like they're stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Mhm.
They need those brand deals to make a living. But if they're not careful, it can totally erode the trust that they've built with their audience.
Yeah, and losing that trust, it can have some pretty serious consequences.
Especially when you consider just how big influencer marketing has become. Like
Mhm.
it's not just about makeup and protein shakes anymore.
Right.
Influencers have the power to like sway opinions on everything, from politics and social justice issues to like mental health and personal finance.
Yeah, and that's where those ethical questions, they get even trickier.
Right.
We're not just talking about consumer choices anymore. We're talking about shaping values and beliefs.
Right. What happens when an influencer with like a huge young audience promotes a product that could be like harmful
Hmm.
or spreads like misinformation about a sensitive topic?
Yeah, it raises some major questions about responsibility and accountability.
Sure. Sure.
Do influencers have a duty to carefully vet the products they endorse? Should they be held to like a higher standard of accuracy when they're talking about complicated issues?
These are tough questions.
They are.
And I don't think there are any like easy answers. I mean, every influencer is different, right?
Hmm.
They all have their own values and motivations. It's not like there's like some official rule book for how to be an ethical influencer.
Yeah, that's true. But that's exactly why it's so important to talk about these things, to raise awareness about the potential pitfalls and encourage everyone, both influencers and their followers, to think critically.
So the next time you're like scrolling through your feed and you see that picture perfect post,
Hmm.
take a moment to like ask yourself, okay, who's behind this message? What's their motivation? And am I being swayed by some clever marketing tactic?
Right. And consider the bigger picture too,
Yeah.
How is this whole influencer culture shaping our values as a society?
Right.
Is it just promoting consumerism and these unrealistic expectations, or is there a way for it to be, more empowering,
Right.
to encourage creativity?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a mixed bag,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what makes it so fascinating. It's
Yeah.
it's not black and white.
Right.
It's this complex web of individual stories and social trends and ethical dilemmas.
It's a reflection of where we are right now, this
Mhm.
this push and pull between being authentic and striving for something better,
Right.
between genuine connection and the desire for success.
One thing that really stood out to me from the sources is just how much work goes into being an influencer.
Oh,
It's
okay.
not all like glamorous vacations and free stuff.
Right.
There's a lot of hustle going on behind the scenes.
Absolutely. Liv White talked about the endless hours she spends filming, editing, managing brand partnerships, and Joe Stanley, the radio host, she pointed out the emotional labor involved in constantly sharing your life with an audience.
Mhm.
Even when you're not feeling your best.
It's like running your own like mini media empire.
Yeah.
There are content creators, marketers, social media managers, personal brands,
Yeah.
all rolled into one.
And they're doing all of this while navigating a constantly changing landscape.
Right.
New platforms are popping up all the time. Algorithms are always shifting.
Yeah, it's a lot to keep up with.
Hmm.
It's easy to forget that behind those perfectly curated feeds,
Yeah.
there are real people dealing with the same,
Mm.
ups and downs as everyone else.
Right. They have doubts. They face creative blocks.
Mm-hmm.
They feel financial pressure. They have to deal with the constant scrutiny of online critics.
So maybe the next time we see an influencer make a mistake or have a public stumble, we could try to be a little more, I don't know, understanding, a
Yeah,
little more compassionate,
I love that. I think we could all use a little more empathy.
regardless of, how many followers we have.
Okay, so we've explored the ethical considerations, the hard work behind the scenes, how influencer culture is shaping our world.
Mm-hmm.
But there's one piece of the puzzle we still need to put in place.
The future. What happens next with this constantly evolving phenomenon?
Ooh, now things are getting really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the digital landscape is constantly shifting. So what does a future hold for influencer culture? All right, so we're back, and it's time to, I don't know, gaze into that crystal ball. What's the future of influencer culture? Like, is it going to fade away, kind of like those neon green platform sneakers we talked about? Or is this something that we're going to be dealing with for years to come?
Well, what's interesting is that influencer culture is already changing so fast.
Mm-hmm.
We're seeing a real shift towards, these niche communities and these things called micro-influencers.
Mm.
Okay, micro-influencers.
Yeah.
So is that like those teeny tiny, super cute succulents that you can like fit in your hand?
Not exactly.
Okay.
Though I do love the image.
Yeah.
No, micro-influencers are, they're creators with smaller but more dedicated followings.
Mm-hmm.
And they often focus on very specific areas of interest.
So instead of like following someone with millions of followers who's promoting everything under the sun, I might follow like, a bunch of smaller creators who are totally in line with my interests.
Exactly.
Whether that's, I don't know, like sustainable fashion or vegan baking or,
Right.
I don't know, underwater basket weaving, whatever.
Exactly. And this trend toward niche communities, I think it's really being driven by this growing desire for authenticity
Mm-hmm.
and real connection. They're craving content that feels more personal and relatable,
Mm-hmm.
less polished, less aspirational.
It's just like that saying, like quality over quantity.
Yeah.
Like, a few close friends who really get you are more valuable than 1,000 acquaintances you barely know.
I like that analogy.
Thanks.
And this shift towards micro influencers, I think it's actually a win-win for both creators and followers.
Ooh, okay. Tell me more. How does everyone benefit?
So for creators, it becomes less about, chasing huge follower counts
Mm-hmm.
and more about cultivating a loyal community that truly values their work. They can be more selective with brand deals, choosing to work with companies that match their values, that
Mm-hmm.
resonate with their audience.
So it's less about like selling out and more about staying true to themselves.
Exactly. And for followers, it means that they're more likely to discover content that feels tailor-made for them.
Right.
They're not being bombarded with generic ads and sponsored posts. They're getting recommendations from people they trust who actually share their interests.
So it's like having a friend who always knows about like the best new restaurants, the coolest indie bands,
Right.
or the most useful life hacks.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Thanks.
And as technology keeps evolving, we can expect to see even more immersive and interactive experiences in the influencer world.
Ooh, okay. Like what? Give me a glimpse into the future.
Well, virtual and augmented reality are already starting to play a role in influencer marketing.
Okay.
Imagine like being able to attend a virtual meet and greet with your favorite influencer or trying on clothes virtually before you buy them.
Wait, hold up. You're saying I could like try on clothes without having to change out of my pajamas?
Exactly.
I'm in.
Right. I mean, the possibilities are really exciting, and as these technologies become more accessible, they'll create even more opportunities for influencers to connect with their audiences in really meaningful ways.
But with all this talk about the future, it's important to remember that influencer culture is still facing some pretty big challenges, right?
Definitely. Issues like transparency and authenticity and ethical responsibility.
Mm.
Those aren't going away anytime soon.
And with artificial intelligence becoming more and more sophisticated. I mean, we're gonna have to be even more careful about, figuring out what's real and what's been created by AI.
Yeah, that's a great point. We're all going to need to develop some serious critical thinking skills to navigate this digital world.
Right.
It's getting more complex every day.
So while the future of influencer culture definitely has a lot of potential, it's also a call to action.
Hmm.
We all need to be, informed, engaged, and discerning consumers of online content.
Absolutely. We need to hold influencers accountable, support ethical practices, and prioritize genuine connection over those superficial trends.
And most importantly, we need to remember that that behind all those carefully curated feeds
Mhm.
are real people, you know,
Yeah.
dealing with the same, uh, messy, wonderful, complicated lives that we all have.
Well said. So, the next time you're scrolling through your feed,